Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight. But my kingdom is not from here." John 18:36. That was Christ before Pilate, standing silent before empire. And that is where no king but Jesus begins, not in rebellion for its own sake, but in a revelation. That truth itself is the only sovereign worthy of our allegiance.
He walks with Christ, he spreads God's love, how he welcomes all. No borders or walls, he's a migrant for Christ, and he answers God's call. Oh, migrant for Christ, lead us on, without borders or walls.
Across 4 centuries, the phrase "no king but Jesus" has carried a paradoxical power. It is at once a declaration of faith and a manifesto of political liberty. Born in the furnace of the 17th century English Civil War, it arose from Puritans who rejected the divine right of kings and insisted that only Christ, not a crown, could claim ultimate loyalty. When Parliament soldiers marched into battle, they sang psalms to a higher monarch whose throne stood above Westminster. The cry was theological, but its consequence was political. Authority must flow upward from a covenant of the people, not downward from the scepter of a ruler, king, or president. No earthly throne could command what belongs to God alone. When this ideal crossed the Atlantic, it took root in the self-governing congregations of New England Puritans and the independent meetinghouses of Baptists and Quakers. Their churches mirrored their towns, locally ruled, covenant-bound, answerable to conscience before any king. Out of this soil grew the colonial habit of resistance to distant authority. By the time American patriots shouted "No king but King Jesus" in 1775, the phrase no longer meant only spiritual allegiance. It had become a political theology of democracy. To serve Christ was to resist any empire. Indeed, this cry, "No king but Jesus," was heard in sermons, as, for example, from Presbyterian minister and delegate to the Continental Congress, Reverend John Zubley, who preached that true Christians owe allegiance to no king but the King of Kings. Again and again in history, the slogan has favored local, participatory control over hierarchical rule. During the Great Awakenings, revivalists used it to empower ordinary believers over clerical elites. In abolitionist pulpits, it meant conscience outranking unjust laws. Each movement reinterpreted the same confession: human conscience always over strong leaders. Yet the phrase has also been misused, co-opted by Christian nationalists who turned a cry of humility into one of domination. Its authentic legacy, however, resists every throne, every flag, and every party that claims a sacred sanction over America. No king but Jesus is not the slogan of the state. It is the song of communities that govern themselves in the light of truth. Wherever people gather in covenant rather than coercion, to deliberate rather than obey, the ancient cry is heard anew. No king but Jesus, no master but conscience, no rule but love and forgiveness. If we hear the shouts of no kings on our streets today, Be sure that it is the same shout heard through our history as it was after the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775, when patriots and crowds rang out across the colonies, "No king but King Jesus."